Milling Through History presents The Real Robin Hood. Robin Hood is a legend which many people know, and depending on how you look at him, he can be seen as either an outlaw or a hero. But who was Robin Hood? Well, we know his famous motto, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, and that he was a nobleman who lost his lands and fought to prevent the usurpation of power from King Richard I. And for some people, he's seen as simply being a fox. However, who is it that inspired this particular hero? Was it a real person or a series of people? History has a very difficult time trying to come up with an answer to that particular question, namely because there's really no way to know for 100% certainty. For instance, the names Robert and Robin were very common during medieval Europe. In addition to this, the surname of Hood can be referenced in two different lights. The first is that of being a hood maker, while the other one indicates wood, so Robin Wood, which is seen in some descriptions of the famous villain, outlaw, or hero. It is also believed that the name Robin Hood was used as an alias by criminals. In fact, it was a very well-established alias used by criminals, namely because it was an easy way to describe them. And as such, the term Robin Hood may have been commonplace in England during the 12 and 1300s, and as such, before any literary character could ever be created from a real person, it had already had its history of its own. But this does not mean that there wasn't at least some type of person who could have inspired that of Robin Hood. In fact, the earliest mentions do come from the rolls of the English justices, as there are 8 different accounts from different justices who say there was a Robin Hood in their jurisdictions. From between the years 1261 to 1644, the term Robin Hood was used specifically for criminals. Even the famed Guy Fawkes of the Gunpowder Rebellion was referred to as a Robin Hood. But there are a few suspects who certainly do come into light as a potential Robin Hood. The first being the Robin Hood of York. The records of him comes from the year 1226, and is believed that his real name may have been Robert Hod, H-O-D. According to history, his property was confiscated, and he would eventually go on to become an outlaw. And while he is referenced 9 times in the records of York, there's no conclusive evidence to prove that he actually was Robin Hood. It could have just been a very unique coincidence. There is, however, a pair of men who could potentially be the framework for Robin Hood. Their names are Robert and John de Ville. Now, John de Ville was actually rather unique as he was the leader of this band of rebels which had occurred during the Second Barons' War, and he would fight on the behest of one Simon de Montfort against Henry III and Edward I. When the war came to an end, John was pardoned by Edward. However, his brother Robert and other relatives disappear from history. And while, once again, there is no direct evidence to prove that these brothers were actually Robin Hood, there does seem to be some possibilities that their own lives could have helped to model it, namely from the fact that they owned property in Barnesdale. They had a fortified home in a place called Hood's Hill, and they had settled the mortgage for one particular night, which ended up being the basis of Sir Richard at the Lee. The one individual, though, whom many people suspect could have been Robin Hood, or at least the primary reference to him, is Roger Godbird, who, once again, had served under Simon de Montfort. However, he was declared an outlaw by King Henry III after the Battle of Evesham, and, interestingly enough, did live in Sherwood Forest for 4 years' time. His arch-nemesis, interestingly enough, was the Sheriff of Nottingham, who, in 1272, was finally able to capture the outlaw, and, having had him held in 3 different prisons, would eventually be forced to let him go, upon being pardoned by King Edward I when the king had returned from the Holy Lands in the 8th Crusade. And so while nobody knows whether or not Robin Hood is a real person, certainly his legend has continued forward, as People of Sherwood look towards Robin Hood as being a figure in their own history, and there have been countless times where the name Robin Hood was used for sporting events, military units, and other groups. As such, while we may never know the true origins of this literary character, it is undeniable that while anyone can pick up a book, the name Robin Hood will certainly be remembered. Be sure to click like, share, and subscribe for future episodes of Milling Through History, and be sure to leave comments below for future episode ideas. And make sure to take a look at our suggested reading page.